The content of this session, again, the table of content of Model 9, the objective of Model 9 I discussed, the basic to manage contaminated sites and soils, the implementation of management of contaminated soil and sites, and conclusions and closing remarks. The basics to manage contaminated soil. Understand the problem with our soil, realize that soil functions are at risk, trigger to develop soil policy, preconditions to sustainably manage contaminated soil, policy priority, legal instrument, principle of financing, principle of professional community, soil management, and an example is soil strategy. This is what we discussed for the basics to manage contaminated soil. Table of content, introduction, legislation, developing contaminated soil, contaminated land acquisition, and again, we end with the reference. The object of this Model 9, we want to sketch the process before management of potential contaminated site from a priority sector. We summarize what is needed to manage potential contaminated sites and contaminated sites. Legislation with realistic goals and time, enforcement of legislation but maintaining economic and social activities, sectoral approach, make choices, inventory of sectors with high likelihood of having contaminated sites, prioritization of sectors, cooperation from selected high priority sectors, an inventory of potential contaminated sites from selected high priority sectors, realistic budgeting estimate covering site assessment, remediation and monitoring, so the budget should cover all aspects, realistic financial instruments, and inform professional communities to carry out. So this is all needed if you want to start the management of contaminated sites. So legislation, enforcement, selection on where to start based on environmental risk, so prioritization. You need cooperation from the sector where the priority sites are. You need the inventory to be able to select high priority sites. You need budget and financial instruments. And of course, you need people to do the job. So this model tries to explain these needed things. So understand what the problem is. It's clear. These are pictures from contaminated and from events that cause contamination. Large fires on oil depots. This is contaminated site in Holland. This was an old gas factory later discovered during house constructions. So the site use could not continue, like they could not building, they should clean. Here mine tailings and disposal of waste. So you have to understand what's going on before you can start managing. And because soil is contaminated, you realize that soil functions are at risk. And what are the soil functions? Production of safe food, storing, filtering and transforming minerals, waters, organic matters and energy, provide clean water and raw materials. It's a platform for human activities, and it has of course the biodiversity, habitat for flora and fauna. So these are the soil functions. So if we zoom into a healthy soil, has often a litter layer and then the different types. The litter layer of the humus is classified with an O. This is familiar for a soil scientist, but please, if you describe soil, try to understand the coding used in soil science. But this is a healthy soil, and the sequence, these layers are called horizons, and each horizon has its specific characteristics. It's from the litter, then to the accumulation, to leaching, then you come to the groundwater, then you come to the horizon which processes, and then to the parent material and bedrock. But these codings are used in the soil science, and these have all its functions. What is now the trigger to develop soil policy? Environmental concern about human health, ecological damage, decline in biodiversity, natural preservation, and public awareness. Economic concerns, disabled spatial development. The example of this one, we could not proceed because there was a contamination. We could not proceed with house building, house constructions. Impact of the groundwater resources, impact of agricultural land, food safety, and reduction area of cultivable land. Setting goals and monitoring processes as a balance between soil protection, land management, and site remediation. That is the management. This presentation is completely different. It's on the legislation and policy, so it's not technical. But this actually is what I want to say. When you want to start the management of contaminated sites, you have your preconditions. You have to raise awareness. And with the awareness raising by NGOs and others, the government starts to set policies. So the policies result into strategy. Then you have to develop the legislation, and the legislation gives you legal instruments, but they have to be enforced. When you have your legislation, you need to develop financial instruments, and with the funds you can start. But not before you have your professional community, and you get your professional community by education. When this is all in place, you can implement your management of contaminated site. Without professional communities, without consultants, without contractors who know how to work, you cannot. So you need to educate. You need to have college and universities that have courses on land management. Without legislation, nothing happens. But also without enforcement, you can have nice legislation. When it's not enforced, nothing will happen. So this should be all in place before you start thinking about site remediation. Then policy priority are indicated by cost to sustainably manage contaminated soil, groundwater and sediments. So this slide is saying that the first thing to do to manage soil is prevention and protection. So it's very easy, don't remediate your soil. If you install a tank, make sure it's liquid tight, it's in a containment, and that you monitor it. To prevent leaking, if you install a gas station, have a floor which is liquid tight, and have a water separator if you have spills. So prevention number one. Then the cost is 1. Risk-based land management, the cost factor will be a 10-fold of the protection. And then you come to the site remediation, which is a 100-fold. So first, your policy should be directed to protection and prevention. Then risk-based management, and the last thing you want to do is the remediation of the site, because that is too expensive. So prevention is number 1. Legal instruments, liabilities and accountabilities allocated. That should be part of your legislation. Responsibility and task of public and private sector should be clear. Then your goals and timeline should be realistic. I've seen legislation where the timeline was not realistic, because take into account that when you do a soil survey, it can take several rounds of sampling, and one round of sampling, including chemical analysis, can take you several months. So be realistic in the goals, especially in time. Land registration, you need to have some kind of land registration to record the quality of the land, but also when it's remediated. And when it's remediated, you need to record the progress. You need technical support, and you cannot design a legislation without technical support. It should be realistic also on the technical side. And you need quality assurance and control and enforcement, but maintaining economic and social activities, meaning that you need to enforce, but when it's not realistic that the landowner, who's for instance a farmer, and he accidentally have a contamination because his tank was leaking and he cannot pay, you should assist him to maintain his economic activity, but he should of course contribute. But that's what I mean. You can enforce, but you should not enforce by obstructing then the economic and social activity. And there comes in the government basic of management. So principle of financing, historical soil is shared responsibility. Historical soil pollution is a shared responsibility between government and sectors. New soil pollutions, the polluter pay principle applies. Risk-based implementation, we discussed that many times. Maintaining economic and social activities, yes, and co-financing from sector or branches. Dutch example, according to the jurisprudence, it is generally assumed that before 1975, people or companies could not have been aware of the fact that activities might contaminate the soil. Consequently, all remediation costs for contamination caused before that date are principally covered by the state government. Although the polluter pay principle is still valid, for practical and juridical reasons, this principle cannot always be followed, while stimulation of the remediation process also trigger continuing government funding. So that's what I want to say. Here, before a certain period, the cost for the remediation is for the government, because people and companies were not aware of soil pollution, which is a relatively new issue. And after that, the polluter pay principle applies, but not in all situations. In some situations, the polluter cannot pay. He can go bankrupt, and then you cannot do anything. So there, the government should step in. Now, this contaminated land management is not only of the old cases, but we still have very new cases. One of the cases is the company Chemours, the old depot in one of our cities, and they are polluting for a long time already the soil and groundwater with PFAS and PFOAs. And now, because they were capable enough and they should have been aware of their actions, they are now prosecuted by the government. And it is due to NGO and private involvement that this company is now brought to justice. And it's not only the company, but also the managers are now on trial, and they face probably a long imprisonment of the managers. I will not go into much details. So still in our country, we deal with this, and still new cases popping up. And the legislation now also allows us to bring these people to court. Now, what I told you that you need a professional community, education, and communication, thus sharing information with your stakeholders, capacity building of the private sector, and capacity building of the authorities. So capacity building of the private sector means that you need to cover in your educational system all these items, soil science, chemical analysis, and companies have to be willing to invest. And therefore, I said that enforcement of legislation is important. If you do not have enforcement of your legislations, then there is no market for private sector to invest. Then this will not develop. So enforcement of legislation is key to develop a private sector capable to assist the government in remediation. But not only the capacity of the private sector should be built, but also the capacity of the authorities. Okay. Now, this is the soil management strategy. I will not go into much details, but you have first on country level your strategy. Here the policies and the legislation are being developed. Then this is going to the regional level, and they have to select where to start, provincial level, depending on your organization in your country. And then you have your site level. And your site level, I direct to you this, the guidelines and quality control and quality assurance should be in place. And the phased approach and risk-based approach is then applicable, and you can consult the guidance for the implementation. But this cannot be done if on country level, regional level, and provincial level strategies are being developed. This is an example of the EU strategy. They have formulated their objectives in the short term, the mid-term, and the long term. And this is recently being published. And I will not go much more into details, but here they made a mistake. They have too much ambitions put into this soil strategy. And if your ambitions are too much, they will also not work. So the soil strategy is published in 2021, and for 2023 they have formulated their things, but it's not reached. So also here the EU made a mistake by being too ambitious. So key issues and steps to implement is selection of high risk priority sectors, selection, site prioritization of selected priority sites, identification of high risk sites from priority sectors, remediation confirmed on risks, high risk sites, examples of financial instruments, and use international experience. This will be discussed in the next key to implementation. Okay, now selection of high risk priority sectors. We all know what sectors are having problems with soil contamination, and here is a list published, and this is probably also true for your country. Waste dumps, municipality, industrial, landfill, fuel, transport, petroleum, metal, chemical stores, intensive use.
Meanwhile, Mr. Fogg, on the chat, there is one question. If you want to think about.
Where is it? Oh, yeah.
The last, yes.
Continue the cost for treatment with the economic benefits of a site. Yeah, this is a very interesting question. And let me rephrase it. The question is how to combine, let's say, economic development of a site, of a contaminated site. Dus how can we combine the cost of treatment with economic benefits of the site after treatment? If the cost is high, can the site be left to recover on its own? It may be possible, and the health impact ignored. Now, I think the question is a very good question. There are examples in Germany where there were very high costs involved in the management of contaminated sites, and they were left behind. And also in the Netherlands, we have contaminated site within the borders of a city, and they cannot be developed. because of the fact that they're contaminant. So what is allowed now, or how do we ask site develop companies to develop the site in, for instance, shopping centers or industries, and with the benefits, the expected benefit of the site, the economic development, you try to finance remediation. Is that clear? I'm thinking of an example. I have an example. An example is, for instance, we remediated a landfill in India, and this landfill was close to the area where they want to develop housing because the city was growing. So we decided to take apart the landfill, so excavate the landfill, take out the organic material, take out the metals, take out the inert fraction, use the inert fraction by reconstructing the landfill with the remaining waste, use the organic fraction to make compost, and then the landfill was being reconstructed with the waste which could not be reused. The inert fraction was used for the drainage layer on the landfill. Can you follow? The inert fraction taken out from the landfill was used to make air drainage and seepage drainage of the reconstructed landfill. On top of the landfill, we constructed a park, and the seepage being collected from the landfill was diverted to a phyto-remediation pond using also the organic material to filter the seepage from the landfill. So with all the materials, the contaminated materials, being used as much as possible, this landfill turned into a park. And the park has a value for the community. So it is a beneficial place. The same we did, for instance, in Holland on the large 100-hectare site near Amsterdam. It is turned into a park and an experimental garden for peat studies. But you have to be creative to look for an added value to your remediated site. And the best is to turn remediation of contaminated sites into valuable sites so they generate money to finance the remediation and the monitoring and aftercare. There are many examples in Germany where they did this. Does it answer the question? Okay. I will skip this one, but I'll skip this one because these are examples of the category. So I skip this one because these are examples of the classification of countries, of categories. This is an example of Holland, and we have a countrywide inventory of company sites to get out the high priority sites to be remediated. I'll skip this one also. Now this is a slide explaining that if you carry out phase one, so the first inventory, which is needed to go down and to do remediation, and then the cost per site is very low because you are going to identify potential contaminated sites, which have a priority.
But if you want, we'll have the question at the end. So at the end, all the questions will be asked to Mr. Fogg, if it's fine for you.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So phase one, the cost per site. Phase 0, that is the inventory phase and the selection of the high-risk sites. You start with high priority sector selection. From there on, you try to select the high priority site, and then you enter phase 1, and then the cost per site increases. And the cost per site increases, of course, the highest are in phase 3, but you have to start somewhere. So this is the funnel which represents the site prioritization of the selected sectors, and by making choices you can get experience and then you can go to other sectors. Just the message of this slide is you have to start somewhere, so make your selections, select a high priority sector, then try to filter out the sites which are having a high risks, then carry out your phase 1, select then a number of sites to be carried on for your phase 2, and then select the sites that can be remediated based on your available budget, but put your money on the sites that has the highest risks. Now these are details of what I just explained. I will continue here. Now some examples of financial instruments. Soil remediation governance between sectors and organization authorities. Sector organization representing I will give this example. It's called, and in the Netherlands there was an agreement between the oil sector and the government and the site owners. It was decided to remediate sites which were polluted with oil contaminants, and then the oil price was raised with 1 cent. The government contributed and the oil companies contributed, and the sites were remediated under the conditions that the owner stopped his activities, thus selling gas oil and then petrol, and then the site was remediated and cleaned. And so the campaign, the countrywide campaign, was paid by the consumers, by the oil companies, and by the government. And the contribution of the site owners was to stop the business. Now, there are several sectors where this same mechanism was designed, and not only in Holland, but it was done in Denmark and Belgium and other countries. So financial instruments, why all the stakeholders that have the financial capacity should then contribute. Now, this is another example, but then we talk about dry cleaning sector, which is also a high priority sector where you have a lot of contaminated sites. This is a German example of the same. And these are, okay, that's also an example of such confidence. And this is on the, let me see, on the railways. So again, also here the railways is a sector that has a lot of contaminated sites. So a confident was also made with the railway sector to develop financial instruments to remediate all sites. And the same was done with city gas works. This was explained earlier. The infinitive assessment cycle described in a publication of Professor Harmsen in 2009. So the infinite circle is you have a problem, you make your conceptual site model, you do risk assessment, you said it's too much, we cannot, then it disappears into the drawer, and after 10 years or 5 years someone said we should do something, and then it goes again. This was familiar, but now based on the approach by classification, by selection high priority sites, and just make decisions, you can implement the sustainable management of sites and just start by selecting based on risks. The last two slides, conclusive remarks. To successfully implement sustainable management of contaminated sites, you need legislation with realistic framework in time and goals, enforcement of legislation but maintain economic and social activities, realistic budget estimates governing site assessment, remediation and monitoring. This should be in place. Sectoral approach but make choices. Realistic financial instrument set up together with private sectors. Cooperation and commitment from the selected sectors is needed, and then an inventory of contaminated sites of the selected sectors. And to do all this, you need an informed and experienced professional community to carry out the job. Can I go to the last one? Closing remark. I showed you this picture earlier, and these are the steps I tried to explain you in the last 3 days, the different phases and the importance of a conceptual site model. But this can only be done when you have, based on risk, select high priority sites. And when your budget is guaranteed, financial instruments are placed and legislation is in place. So thank you very much. This was my last slide, and I hope I didn't take too much time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fogg. I want to highly appreciate all these 3 days for all your explanations that were very well deserved. So thank you very much. Thank you again. If you want to ask questions, please feel free to do it now. If not, you have the email address from Woodwin at the screen.
Do these treatments or remediations can be applied for agricultural wastewater?
Yeah, I understand the question. Wastewater treatment, and then it comes from installations or from sewage, is a different subject, because you talk about different components and different volumes. But in general, the techniques used for groundwater remediation, stripping, biological processes, are also used in the treatment of wastewater. But wastewater needs different approach, because you talk about larger quantities, and wastewater treatment is really a different subject, and I'm not into that. But groundwater, of course, is using techniques from wastewater treatment facilities.
Sorry, Mr. Foggy, he's mentioning the agriculture wastewater, like drainage. Maybe because they have like some pesticides.
Okay, meaning the drainage around your fields.
Yeah, the farms and agriculture
Okay.
practices.
Okay, now that's I recently completed a project in Tajikistan, and that was confronted with this situation. You had agricultural land, which was used for many years for the growing of cotton, and cotton growing in the Soviet time was using a lot of pesticides, including DDT and others. So the drainage channels around these agriculture fields receive the fine particles of the agriculture fields, and they are contaminated. So the sludge the sediment layer, the bottom sediments in these drainage layers were contaminated with POPs. And we decided to leave these sediment layers because it was too much. And we only said, don't use anymore the drainage layer for catching fish or whatever. And if you are taking away the sediments because of hydrological purpose, the sediments should be brought to somewhere else. So nautic dredging, it's a bit, or let me say hydrological dredging to keep the function of the drainage channels around fields should then be under environmental conditions. So the sludge should be brought to a landfill and the restriction on the use of these channels should be based on the risk related to the use. So if you have channels or drainage channels around your fields that are contaminated, and when you do maintenance work on these drainages, you should dredge the channels under environmental conditions so that you're not exposed, and the land use or the use of the channels should be limited. But this is a large problem because you cannot remediate all your agricultural land around. But if you have hotspots or land which is not used anymore because it's too much contaminated by pesticides, you can first of all install sediment traps. So before it enters your sediment or your drainage, you can install sediment traps to collect the fine particles to be treated somewhere else and not to disperse it to the channel. And if you do not use the land, you could introduce phytoremediation.
Thank you, Mr. Fogg. I think it was clear. If not, while we wait for his feedback, we have a second question from Hassan Mohammed Ali, that it's also in Arabic. Please, translator, if you can translate. It's also on the chat, it's below the previous one.
Yeah, I would like to come back on the last answer because I have to think. And I think if you're confronted with sediment or drainages which are contaminated, sediment traps to be installed in your drainage is a very good mitigation measure of getting your fine particles which contain contaminants to take out. So lower the speed of your water, have your sediment traps, barriers, and then maintain this by taking away the contaminant behind your sediment traps. Do you know what a sediment trap is? A sediment trap is a barrier from any material where you allow water to stand still before it's going further. So a certain level is then reached and then it overflows, but because the speed is being reduced, you allow the sediments in the water to settle, and then the top part of the water streams away, and then you try to reduce the sediment load in your water. You can install several traps, so several barriers behind one another in your channel, and then the sediment is being settled on the bottom of your drainage, and then you take away at regular intervals these contaminated sediments. That's one way to deal with it. Okay, we can go to the next if you're done with the translation.
Question, Mr. Hassan wrote, I believe that these operations need legislations to regulate them or organize them.
Yes, of course, yes. And not only legislation, but also the enforcement of legislation. If it's not enforced, you can have legislation and then no one will do anything if enforcement is not in place. Yes, correct.
On the chat, Mr. Fogg, there is another question in English this time for you. Thank you for all the information. May I know if you are a bioremediation reviewer? Because some journal want to send reviewer name.
Let me see where
I don't know if you can read, because I think it's more for reviewer.
Where is it? I don't see it in the chat.
Chat, Muna Ibrahim to everyone.
Okay.
It's in the bottom, not the last one, the previous one. Thank you for all information.
Thank you.
May I know if you are a bioremediation reviewer?
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you for all. May I know if you are a bio-reviewer? Can cause some journal was sent. I want to cause some journal want to send some review name. I do take care of second opinions of remediation actions. Yes, I do. Yes, sometimes they ask me to give a second opinion on remedial actions or evaluation reports or on site survey reports, and then I read them and I give my comments. That's more or less the job I'm doing also.
Do you have any other question, participant? If not, I will thank you again, Mr. Mr. Fogg. So now you know already one expert. As he has just mentioned, he does these second reviewers and this. So if you have any doubt, hesitation, you want to ask some question, please feel free to contact him back. It's a pity that this 3 days webinar was not being able to be done in person in Tripoli, because this was our intention, the intention of Mr. Fogg, Omar Sharif, and myself. But due to the circumstances, it was not possible. What I would like to at least see at the coming years or the coming months, if this is possible to take place, for example, now in Tripoli, now you already have the overall picture of the problematic. You can come with ideas, you can mention something, and maybe you can work more on this topic. So you know that there is UNEP map, you know these regional centers as MedWave always wants to try to help to put the Barcelona Convention on this pollution and contamination site in the Mediterranean Sea on the countries according to the necessities of the countries. So Mar Sharif asked for this workshop and we deliver. We know that there is a problematic. We will push to help you in all kinds of possibilities, projects, looking for finance and budget that today, for example, Mr. Fogg was talking about. So as he was mentioning, if you don't have the budget at the beginning, please, we will not go to throw this project in a drawer. So this is important, and MedWave role, it's always helping the countries on this. And now, do the last remarks. I will also give the floor to Mar Sharif, because I think the collaboration between institutions and with experts, it's always something very positive. And I am proud that Omar Sharif is working at the ministry. So it was a very easy communication. So please, Omar, now you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Jordi. Having this said, thank you again to Mr. Goodwin and also Mr. Jordi, for organizing this workshop. In fact, he insisted to conduct this workshop more than I did online. But, by all the means, he supported us and supporting, the Ministry of Environment, Libya, to have the first workshop, kind of these workshops focusing on the PAPs. As Mr. Jordi said, if you have like any ideas or proposals, from where you are working now, please send your proposal, or you can visit the Ministry of Environment to talk more about these topics and how can we, the first step, as Mr. Poki mentioned, we have to identify those PUBs or elements, first in the country, where are those sites? Then we need to develop, the risk assessment and how we can remediate these sites. So we have started, before on identifying some PUBs in the country in cooperation with Ministry of Environment and the focal point of Stockholm Convention, but we didn't finish this project. So we are happy, if you have any information or inventory of those PUBs in your university, for example, or you can start like locally, right? So from your work, like universities or any industries, and also in the public governments or offices. So please don't hesitate to visit us in Ministry of Environment and contact me. I will share my email here and you will find it in CC in the email shared by the agency. So also I would like to thank the agency, for organizing this and providing all these services, the translation and also the Zoom link, and providing the internet and the electricity and other things. So probably we will share the whole workshop materials by the 10th of July, I believe. So you will find the whole videos of these workshops that have been recorded and translating in Arabic and English. And you will find the whole slides will be shared with you also. So that's it. Thank you very much. And also I would like to thank the attendants, for their commitments, with us through these days. It's a long trip, but finally I'm happy, to see this topic disseminated into our country through different sectors and private sectors and NGOs and individuals. So thank you again, and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your attention and giving me the chance to share. And for more information, you can, of course, always guidelines on the website. And hopefully see you once.
Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you.
Okay,
So,
thank you. See you.
goodbye.